What's up, I'm Ijemma and welcome back to my channel. In a previous video of mine, I was walking through the basic introduction to Cypress, everything from setting it up with your current application to writing some very minimal tests. In this video, I want to continue that discussion by walking through the Igbo API homepage and showing you how it uses Cypress tests to make sure that different components of the site works as expected. Let's see how the Igbo API uses Cypress. So here we're looking at the Igbo API project, and first thing that we want to do is locate our Cypress directory, since that's going to be the directory that's holding all of our tests. At the top level of the project, we have our test directory, and inside of our test directory, we can see that we have some Mocha tests, but more specifically, we have our Cypress tests in the Cypress directory. If we open the Cypress directory, we can see that we have our integration directory, and we only have one test file called client.test.js. If I open up this file, we can see that there are a number of tests that we run against the home page of the API. So it's always good to remember that it doesn't really matter where your Cypress directory is, as long as it lives inside of your project. Cypress is smart enough to find the directory and then pull up the tests that live inside of your integration directory. So to kind of visualize what's going on with this test file, I'm actually going to spin up Cypress by running our yarn cypress command. Yarn cypress is actually responsible for not only starting up our Cypress instance, but also starting the production build of our application. I'm also going to start our database just to make sure that we can actually make requests to our local database while testing. To have better insight of what our yarn cypress command actually looks like, cross-env is an npm package that allows us to set environment variables in both Mac and Windows operating systems. I'm setting our node environment to test so we can tell our backend to run in a test environment. I'm also setting our client test environment variable to true so we can tell our front end that we're testing in a test node. And then we run npm run all, which is an npm package that allows us to run other package.json scripts in parallel. So the first thing that I start is my application with the start command, and then after that I run my yarn cypress open command, which is just calling Cypress open. So when we call yarn cypress, it's spinning up our application in the production build and also starting up Cypress. As I mentioned before, we only have one test file, which is client.test.js. So we can actually run this by clicking on the file. So when we click on the file, it's going to spin up our Chrome instance, and then we can watch all of our tests just be ran by the Cypress test environment. So this is what Cypress does. Given a sequence of steps, it's just going to run through each of those instructions and follow whatever it was told to do. Again, if you click on any specific test, you can hover over each step within that test to see what Cypress did exactly. So for our first test, I'm hovering over the get step where we're looking for the first H1, and then I'm trying to find the H1 that actually has the text that says First African Language API. We also want to check to see that no text on the screen rendered out an unexpected error has occurred, because that sometimes happens. We want to make sure that if that is happening with an update that's supposed to be released soon, we want to catch it and then make sure that we address it before it starts to affect people in production. So we didn't see an unexpected error has occurred on the screen, so this test successfully passed. We can step through each of these tests. There's not many of them. And the rest of the tests are the same thing, where you can click on a specific test and then hover over each of the steps to see what Cypress did exactly. But to have more context on how we want to write tests specifically, let's look at the test file itself. So again, back inside of our client.test.js file, we can see that we use the describe block with the name Igbo API homepage. If we go back to our browser, we can see that that's going to group all of our tests under the Igbo API homepage group. I use the before hook to visit the API homepage before any of our other tests run, so we don't have to keep repeating the logic of please visit the homepage for each and every individual test. After that, I use another describe block to group our desktop tests. So inside of Igbo API, we have our desktop group, which has two tests at the very top level, where we want to execute the JS in browser and render the API homepage, and then also render the about page. So I use the before each hook to set the browser's viewport to a MacBook 16. The reason why I'm specifying the dimensions is because the DOM changes slightly if a user's on a mobile device or on desktop. So because these are our desktop apps, I want to make sure that we're rendering in the desktop dimensions. So for our first test, we have execute JS in browser and renders API homepage. This is a really minimal test given that there's only two separate steps. The first step is we're looking for an H1 DOM element that contains the text First African Language API. And then the second step is that we're looking for any DOM element that contains the text an unexpected error has occurred. We don't care so much about what type of DOM element contains this text, just because it's never expected from our application code to specifically or deliberately render this. This only occurs whenever an error happens, so we just want to make sure that that text never appears. So the way that we make that check is that we chain the function should, where we pass in the parameter not.exist, So this text should not exist at all at any point in this test. So our next test is render the about page, which is pretty straightforward, where we're looking for an li DOM element that contains the text about, and we want to click on it. After that, we want to find by text contact, and then if we do find that text, we also want to make sure that the page contains the email : text. So if we go back to the test runner and we click on render the about page, and then we hover over contains the about string, and then you can see that it clicks on it, it's going to take us over to the about page. And then we run the command find by text, where we're looking for the contact header, and then we're also looking for the email : text to exist. We make this check because the contact header is very unique to the about page, along with the email : just to make sure that we're rendering the email : and then any email after it. We could be more explicit and say that we're looking specifically for the Igbo API at gmail.com email, but since this page isn't changing too much, that check wasn't really needed at the moment that this test was written. If you look at the documentation for Cypress, you'll actually notice that find by text isn't a built-in Cypress function. The find by text is one command that comes from a plugin that I use inside of this project. I'm actually using the cypress-testing-library plugin, which adds a couple of extra commands that we can use to chain on the CY or the Cypress module. I'm going to drop a link to the cypress-testing-library GitHub so you can read through what exactly this plugin is doing. Essentially, what you get from this plugin is these extra commands like find all by text, find all by label, or even find by placeholder, and more commands that are really helpful. The main benefit of using the Cypress testing library is that their commands are a little bit more readable than the built-in Cypress commands. If we go back to our source code and see what I mean by this, find by text is just a lot more explicit of a command than, let's say, contains, because you know exactly what you're getting out of that command. You're trying to find a DOM element, any DOM element that contains the text contact. If you guys want another video that walks through setting up your Cypress testing environment with the Cypress testing library plugin, let me know and I can definitely make another video. So after those first two tests, I create another describe block that says register account, and this is going to group our tests that specifically focus on registering a developer account. So what I'm doing here is I'm just explicitly saying I want to visit the signup page, and then we're going to find by text our signup with the period at the end. After that, we have another test that says fill out the signup form and submit for developer account. So what I'm doing again here is that I'm specifically going to the signup page. So after that, I'm calling the Cypress intercept function, which is a really powerful function that allows you to intercept or kind of transform or mutate any network requests that's coming from your Cypress test. So what I'm doing specifically in my test is that I'm calling the intercept function and I'm passing in the route action. So I'm trying to catch all post requests. And then I become a little bit more specific by saying I want to catch all post requests that contain the word developers in it. And then after I call the intercept function, I chain the as function so I can name my interception. So I name my interception as post developer, and the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to refer to whatever has been intercepted at a later point in my test. After that, I'm calling the Cypress testing library's find by test ID function, which takes in the data test value that I'm looking for. So specifically, I'm looking for the DOM element that has the signup name input value assigned to its data test HTML attribute. To be more clear about what's going on with this, we can actually search inside of our project, and we can see inside of this signup page, we have an input component that takes on the data test HTML attribute. So the data test HTML attribute is used specifically for test runners to be able to find DOM elements very quickly. So I know that since this input component is only expecting a user to provide their name for the signup page, I'm going to say that the data test is going to be signup name input. You can also see that I have another data test here for my entire signup form called signup form. And then again, here we have another input component that takes on the data test HTML attribute, and its value is signup email input because we're expecting the user to provide their email for this input. And this keeps going on with signup password input, and then finally their signup host input when the developer is providing the host of their application. So the find by test ID makes it really clear exactly what you're doing. You're trying to find a DOM element that has the signup name input data test value. So for this function, we're looking for our specific input component that has signup name input for its data test HTML. And then after that, we want to clear out all the text that's inside of that input and then we want to type developer. So you can see that happening inside of our test runner, where we have fill out the signup form and submit the developer account. And then we call find by test ID, where we look for a signup name input, and it's able to target this input right here. Then we clear out any values that might exist in the input before we came to this page, just to make sure that we can fully type out the word developer with no extra characters. And then we keep going down the line where we look for the signup email input, we clear out its input, and then we type in the developer at test.com, and then we look for the signup password input, and then we look for the signup host input, and we get to the bottom of the form. So all that's happening with these 4 lines, we're looking for our corresponding input, clearing all the text that was existing in it before, and then typing in some new text. Then after that, I use the find by text function to look for a button that contains the create action text. So in theory, there could be any other DOM element on the page that contains the text create account, but I know for a fact that we only have a button that contains that text, so we're okay just to use find by text. And then once we click on that button, we know that we're expecting our post request that's pointing to our developer's route to be executed. So when we saved our post developer's interception, we're actually able to call the Cypress wait function that is waiting for our interception to be completed. So the way that this works is when we call Cypress wait, we pass in a string where we append the @ symbol and then the name of whatever we save using the as function. So we saved our interception as post developer, so then we call CY-wait at post developer. So Cypress now knows that it's waiting for any post request that's pointing to our developer's route to be completed, and then once it's completed, it returns promise that we can chain using the then function. Res is an object that contains all types of information, but specifically the information that we want to focus on is the response body. So since Cypress is a testing framework, it comes built in with the expect function, which expects the given value to equal a certain value that's specified. So what I'm saying here is that I'm expecting my response object status code to equal 200, meaning that the developer was successfully able to create an account. And then I double check and verify that that all worked by looking for the text success, check your email to render on the screen. So the reason why I check the status code and also to make sure that the text renders on the screen is because maybe the response comes back to be not 200, but the text still renders success, check your email. They're not highly coupled where one always means the other, so we just want to make sure that our network request returns with the value that we expect along with the front end rendering out the right success message. So these are the minimal Cypress tests that I've been writing for the Igbo API homepage. The homepage doesn't have too much functionalities, so there's not too many tests, but I really wanted to focus attention on using extra Cypress commands like intercept and wait, and even using the viewport command. But that's it on Cypress and how I've been using it for the Igbo API homepage. If you have any questions about Cypress, or even if you want like a walkthrough on how to set up your Cypress testing environment with the cypress-testing-library plugin, please let me know down in the comment section below. As always, I'm on Twitter. I talk about JavaScript, web development. You can send me a DM and we can have a chat. Also, if you're interested in contributing to the Igbo API homepage, the links are down in the description box down below. Please fill them out, reach out to me if you're interested. Any help would be super helpful. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.